صباح الخير. نلتقي اليوم نرحب بالمترجم الألماني هارتموت فاندريتش الذي ترجم الكثير من الأدب العربي من اللغة العربية إلى اللغة الألمانية. والأستاذ هارتموت فاندريتش هو مدرس للغة العربية والأدب العربي الكلاسيكي في جامعة هو في جامعة بيرن أنت في بيرن منذ 30 سنة.
في بيرن منذ 45 سنة.
نعم.
أوكي.
مقيم في بيرن منذ 45 سنة.
كان هذا بعد دراساتي في ألمانيا أولا وفي الولايات المتحدة بعدين.
نعم، في درس الأدب العربي وزار مصر كأول بلد عربي له بعد 35 سنة من دراسته، أي لم يذهب إلى مصر أثناء الدراسة وإنما ذهب بعد دراسته. أحب أن أبدأ السيد هارتموت قال شيئا جميل جدا، وهو شبه المترجم. قال، سأقرأ ما قال أن المترجم هو برأيي القديس كريستوفروس، هذا الرجل قوي البدن الذي كانت وظيفته حمل الناس عبر نهر خطير، فقد ظهر له في ليلة من الليالي السيد المسيح مرتدي زي مسافر عادي، وحمله كريستوفرس من ضفة إلى ضفة أخرى، وكان خبيرا بالضفتين ويشعر بكل واحد يفرض عليه العبور. توضح صورة القديس كريستوفرس عملية المترجم، وهي نقل النص من لغة إلى لغة أخرى. هذه هي حقيقة المترجم وبأروع الكلمات الممكنة. السيد هارتموت هو مترجم، وكما ذكرنا ترجم الأدب العربي جزء من الروايات الحديثة إلى اللغة الألمانية. طبعا نحن نشكرك جزيل الشكر على هذه الترجمة، لأن هناك قصور في نقل الترجمات العربية إلى لغات أجنبية، وأنا في رأيي أنت قمت بشيء عظيم، لأنه الغرب لا يعرف عنا الكثير، نحن نعرف الكثير عن الغرب. قرأنا روائع الكتب الكلاسيكية والأدب الأدب الإنجليزي والفرنسي وبجميع الدول الأوروبية قرأنا أدبهم، ولكنهم يعرفون القليل جدا عنا. فأي مجهود من أي أديب ومترجم أوروبي ينقل الأدب العربي، في رأيي هذا يقلل الفجوة بين الشعوب، بين الشعب العربي والشعوب الأخرى. أنا أحب أسألك سؤال، ما سر اهتمامك باللغة العربية ومتى بدأ اهتمامك بهذه اللغة؟
I'll switch to English. It's faster to me, and I hope you understand it. Yeah. No, it's really faster. I can tell you more in half an hour than I could in Arabic. So, and there is a translator, fortunately. So, well, my beginnings of studying Arabic was actually a mixture of chance and snobism. It was chance because in high school I did learn some Hebrew, classical Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, so which means a Semitic. I got introduced to a Semitic language, and then after, when entering the university, I decided not to study. I wanted to study languages and literature, and I decided not to take French or English or German because anybody did that. And so it was the part of the snobism that made me decide for Semitic languages first, and then studying all along. I eventually, made many switches and finally arrived at contemporary Arabic literature. But that's a long way, really, almost a 40-year way.
أنت ترجمت لأدباء عرب منهم علاء الأسواني، ومن كذلك ترجمت عمارة يعقوبيان.
I translated all books that Ala al-Aswani has published so far,
نعم.
which means, you know, the famous or the notorious, we don't know, you know, famous or notorious, Imarat Yaqubiyan, which really made it even into the Egyptian parliament, because Ala al-Aswani was accused of being a traitor to his country. And, but also then more recently I translated, or after that I also translated Chicago, and I translated a collection of short stories, and most recently I translated by him the novel called Nadi Sayarat, the Automobile Club.
ما هي الصعوبات التي واجهتك في ترجمة أعمال علاء الأسواني؟ ما هي الصعوبات؟
Well, compared to many other authors, the difficulties were much less in the writing of Ala al-Aswani than in with others. There were really few. I mean, this is, I guess, one of the reasons for of this particular novel to have become famous in the Arab world in general, because it reads very easily. You know, even I could read it on the train. Usually, I have to, you know, sit down and have a dictionary within my reach to make sure. But the text of Ala al-Aswani you can read very easily, and this is one of the big advantages. And she has no, say, particularly, say, references to particular individuals, to a particular points in history, in the old history, that you have to check on. He has no particular vocabulary that is, say, far away from the vocabulary used on everyday, in everyday life. So, you know, really translating Ala al-Aswani is not quite the work of Christophorus, whom you just mentioned. You know, the famous myth of Christophorus is my favorite saint of the Christian tradition, because the point is not only that he carries something from one side of the river to the other, but the load on his shoulders becomes heavier and heavier as he advances. And this is the most important point. It's the saint, you know, he waits there for people to be carried across a river. This used to be a traditional profession in Europe before the arrival of bridges. Or if you didn't have bridges, you had people who were strong enough to carry you across the river. And here he was waiting, and then one night someone came and Christophorus took him on his shoulders and started carrying him across the river. And while he was walking across the river, the load became more and more heavy. Became really heavier and heavier on his shoulders. And in the end, he was just almost not, he almost failed to reach the other side of the river, because the load, you know, carrying Christ is such a load. And I like the mythology, the myth behind it, you know, to take a load that while you are dealing with it, while you're working with it, becomes heavier and heavier. And this is exactly what happens with translations. Very often I take a book, I think, you know, it will be easy going to translate it, and while translating it, I find that there are many intrinsic difficulties that require much more attention and much more work than originally expected.
Yeah. هذا صحيح جدا طبعا. وهذه الأسطورة جميلة جدا لتعبر عن جهد المترجم ولكن هناك نلاحظ في بشكل عام لا ينظر إلى الترجمة على أنها عمل إبداعي. It's not a creation. The translator is just translates from
لا
a
لا لا
language.
لا
Yeah. ما هو
بالعكس الترجمة إبداع. And I have a few friends, writers, Arab writers, who, when we get the new book translated into German, say, well, here is our common work. You know, it's our common work. It's not his, it's no longer his work, and it's not completely mine. Because we did something together, and if you translate, I mean, this is the sort of, you know, that's the daily bread of translation. You take something, and it does not turn out to be the same in the end. It can't. I mean, this kind of translation does not exist. There are no two words that are completely identical from one language into the other. So you lose some meaning if you have a word that has a certain field of meaning, as we call it in linguistics. It has a certain field of meanings in the original language, and then you have to use a certain word to translate it into another language. But in the other language, this word has a different field of meaning. So the associations, the allusions to any word are different from one language in the other, and so you have to decide. I mean, I like to take the example of house, or you know, if you have in Arabic you have the word bait. Let's take the word bait first, but the word bait also is part of a poem. And it is in this field of meaning of this particular word, it's always there. Or if you have the word house, if you would translate it or retranslate it into Arabic, you would have to decide whether you take bait, dar, manzil, or what have you. Yeah? You have them all, yeah? So you have to decide which one you take, and in each case, the reception of the meaning with the reader will be different.
هذا الكلام صحيح. أنا فقط حبيت أن تتكلم عن الموضوع. أنا مترجمة مثلك وترجمت أعمال أدبية أيضا، وحبيت أن أعرف يعني ما تقوله بهذا الشأن. أعتقد أن هذه الفكرة عن المترجم بدأت في أيامنا هذه شيئا فشيئا تتغير. الآن هناك الكثير من الدراسات التي تؤكد على أن المترجم أن الترجمة هي إبداع، وأن مخيلة كل مترجم تختلف عن يعني نفس العمل لو ترجمه اثنان ستكون الترجمة مختلفة بحسب مخيلة كل مترجم. ليس اختلافا، يعني هنا ستكون هناك بعض الاختلافات في الناتجة من حساسية أو إحساس كل مترجم بالنص. المثل الذي ضربته عن البيت والدار هذا مثال يعني يجسد ويمثل، يعني أعطيت مثل جيد على هذه، لأنه هناك اختلاف بحسب سياق النص، بحسب هذا صحيح. لقد قلت أنتقل إلى زيارتك إلى مصر. لقد قلت أن زيارتك لمصر كانت صدمة بالنسبة لك. زيارتك الأولى لمصر كانت a shock for you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. لماذا؟
Well, you see, I'm in the beginning, I'm a very, very traditional European Orientalist. That's the way I started, with classical literature, with the study of Tabari and Mas'udi and the Quran and things, you know, literature of or writings of the early time. This was the beginning, and I got my doctorate from the United States from University of California in Los Angeles. And at that point, when I got a doctorate in Middle Eastern Studies, I had not been to the Middle East. Yeah, I began my studies in 1966 in Germany. I continued in the United States in 68, from 68 to 72, and it was only then, after having a doctorate about medieval Arabic literature, Ibn Khalikan, if anybody remembers, Ibn Khalikan, I don't know, yeah, the Wafayat al-A'yan. And so I wrote my dissertation on that, and it was only after that that I went to the Middle East for the first time. And of course you can imagine, you know, having grown up in the south in southern Germany and having lived in Southern California, coming to Cairo would necessarily, I would say, be a shock to anybody, you know, who is not used to the environment. I think, you know, I think it's completely normal. And the shock settled after a while, and I went back and back and back, and I learned a lot in Egypt. This was probably then from the late 70s. I went almost regularly, almost once a year. I'm in Egypt for 1 or 2 weeks to see friends, to very often to go to the book fair there, and to see friends. And they were good friends, you know, who introduced me, writers and professors of literature, who introduced me to contemporary Arabic literature. I had no idea when I left university, contemporary Arabic literature was completely it was non-existent to me. You know, literature maybe ended with Ibn Iyas in the, you know, sort of the early 16th century, and that was it. And the interest in the modern and contemporary Arab world and literature only began later on.
يعني في الجامعة لم تدرس الأدب العربي الحديث أو المعاصر.
Well, at that time in Tübingen, where I studied in the south of Germany, and in other German universities at that time, in the middle of the 1960s, there was hardly anything on the modern Arab world. I mean, what Arabic studies were considered, you know, classical studies. They were usually in the same framework, taught in the same framework, roughly as Greek and Latin, and they were also taught in the way they teach Greek and Latin. And this has changed since. In the United States, it was much better, much more open. They had many more fields about the Middle East that they taught at the university: language, literature, both classical and modern. But at that time, I was specializing on classical literature. And they also taught, you know, political sciences, sociology, art, music, even Middle Eastern music was taught at that time. So it was a wide field, a very wide field.
نعم، يعني الأمور بدأت تتغير. بدأ يدخل الأدب المعاصر أحب أن أسألك كيف تختار الكتب التي تترجمها؟ هل تختارها على أساس فكر معين، اتجاه معين؟ كيف تختار النصوص؟
Here again, you know, any translation or any work chosen, particularly if it's not already on an international commercial level, is also chance. It's by chance. What I do is actually, I mean, there are different ways of, you know, approaching a work that I will eventually translate. It's first to ask people. That's why I try to travel as often as I can to Arab countries, to talk to people who are knowledgeable in the field of literature, and I ask them, is there anything interesting, is there anything new that you would recommend? Now, if 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people would mention the same title, I would be alerted. Yeah, I would definitely be alerted, because apparently there is, for some reason or other, something to this particular title, and I may then go and buy the book, and may then once I bought the book, start reading it. I may throw it away after a while, or I may continue reading it. And if I like it, I may try to propose it to a publishing house. And here we are at the next problem, the major problem, the publishing houses. So I have, that's really what I've been doing through the past, almost say about 20 years, or actually more than 30 years, traveling around, looking what people talk about, and then look also at some literary magazines, what they are writing about, which works they're writing about, and then see how much I can read. My reading capability of Arabic is very limited. It still goes slowly. I mean, after 45 years, it's still a slow procedure, much slower than German, English, or French, or sometimes even Italian. But so it takes a lot of time until you're through a work, and then can propose it. 20 years ago, novels from the Arab world were still, say, between 150 and 300 pages. If you look at the novel that has won the Booker Prize just a few days ago, it has, I think, about 550 or 600 pages. So the volume also has changed. That's an international phenomenon. It's not particular to the Arab world. I mean, books are bigger, usually bigger these days. I don't know exactly why. It's not always necessary, but they are, and so it takes longer to go through reading them.
Yeah, maybe they have a lot of things to say because of a lot of problems around us.
It may be. As far as the Arab world, I think in some workshops it was a topic also, or will be the topic. As far as the Arab world is and Arabic literature is concerned, there is a problem with publishing houses. There is no person responsible to fight with the author about the text. I say, but really fight with the author about the text. We call them lector. This is the reader responsible at a publishing house for a good text. And if he gets a text, has the impression, this is a good text, but there are weaknesses, then the lector, the responsible at the publishing house, will go to will contact the writer and say, okay, you have to change here, you have to cut down here, and this is a function that so far is hardly is hardly found in Arabic publishing houses. So this is a problem, but the growth of the volume of the bulk of books is the same internationally.
Yeah. أحب أن أسألك عن مدى تأثير ترجماتك على الجمهور الألماني. هل هناك إقبال على قراءة هذه الكتب؟ هل صادفك في يوم من الأيام أحد الألمان الذي التقيت به وقال لك واو أنا لم أكن أعرف أن كذا أو كذا، أو أنا هذا الكتاب أضاف لي شيئا، أو لم أكن أعرف شيئا عن العالم العربي وصادفك هذا الشيء؟
Well, yeah. Just to add a little to your former question, because it wasn't really completely answered yet, because you asked me about the criteria of selection. Because, of course, after reading a book, or while reading a book, it has to appeal to me in some way or other. I mean, this is almost necessary. I have refused to translate some books that were offered to me to translate because I thought they were not worth my time. You know, this happens, so it's my personal decision also to decide which books I will propose to a publishing house. And then, of course, it's the publishing house to do the rest of the decisions, to take or not to take the book.
Yeah.
But now back to the question of the public. Of course, if we talk about a public reading Arabic literature, we're talking about very, very limited numbers. Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and we have to face this. They print for Arabic novels. They will print in a publishing house between 1,000 and maybe 5,000 copies maximum. But 5,000 is already sort of connected with big hopes about the success of a book. Usually it will be between 1,000 and 2,500 copies. And then they either sell the book or they don't. Yeah, and it happens that some books do not sell at all, others sell better. And this is something that cannot really be foreseen necessarily. I think this is the same in all countries. Of course, you can do some publicity for a book. But even if you do publicity, I mean, I translated some books by an Arab writer who lives in Germany, and he's present, omnipresent on the media everywhere, but the publishing house complains of not selling his books. So you see, there is nothing that can definitely and finally foresee or tell you what will happen to the book on the market.
نعم. هل هناك كتاب ترجمته إلى الألمانية ويعني كان إقبال الجمهور عليه أكثر من غيره في ألمانيا مثلا؟
Well, for a while, only for a while, this was in the late 90s and the beginning of the 20th century, I translated several novels by the Libyan author Ibrahim al-Kouni, who is really, I think, one of the most outstanding writers in the Arab world today. And his, particularly, I think his novel Al-Majus is a novel on an international, on a world literature level. There's no doubt about it. And he had a rather good reception for a while with his smaller novels and with this particular big novel. Now this has receded, and also Al-Aswani had a rather good reception, or was sold rather well, let's put it this way. If this is the reception, the point of reception, then it was Al-Aswani also probably with the two books, the Imarat Yakubian and the Nadi Sayyarat. They are the two books, his two books best received on the German market. And then in the beginning also, there were, for a while, it was also Zaha Khalifa, for instance. When I started translating, the first authors I actually translated were Palestinians. It was Zaha Khalifa who was the head of the jury for the Booker this year, the Palestinian author, and it was Ghassan Kanafani, the one who was killed in 1972 in Beirut. And for a while, and this had also political reasons, of course. If we talk about literature, we also have to talk about politics and political relationships. And this was in the beginning of the 1980s. And it was a period in Europe, in Germany in particular, that was really marked by reports about hijackings by Palestinians, etc., all these events worldwide. And there were some people asking, well, isn't there anything but hijacking from the part of the Palestinians? And it was actually then that two publishing houses decided to do something about it, and they published some novels by, the first novels by Zaha Khalifa, and collections by Ghassan Kanafani.
Yeah. Thank you so much because you translated these two great writers, Palestinian writers, and it's necessary that people in the West know about the Palestinian cause. أنا أحب أن أسألك لماذا هناك إقبال قليل على الترجمات على الكتب العربية بالألمانية؟ لماذا في رأيك؟ هل هناك لو كانت كتب إنجليزية أو غربية لكان الجمهور أقبل عليها أكثر؟ لماذا في رأيك؟
Well, this is one of the most tricky questions. There is a book that I read recently and that really fascinated me in English by an Englishman called Tim Parks, who is an Englishman professor in Italy, and he wrote a book, Where I Am Reading From. This is the title. It's a very strange title, and he talks about the fact that literature in the wake of globalization also is in danger of being globalized. And globalized meaning, as far as literature is concerned, being Americanized. Only in tendency. I'm not talking about that this is actually happening.
No, you are right.
But there are really trends, and we can also see this. I mean, if I have, just to take one example from Arabic literature, if I have a novel where on the first page the author talks about Kulthum and about the Beatles in Arabic, and she puts a footnote for Kulthum and not for the Beatles, then you can actually see how far this interest of being acceptable for the West has reached already. Because which Arab author has to explain to an Arab audience, to an Arab public, who Kulthum is? It would be rather more logical to explain who the Beatles were. I mean, probably no longer, but anyway. But it would be much more reasonable. And I think, you know, there is definitely a problem or not a problem. Well, there is a trend, a very strong trend to translate from American literature. If a book is written in Brooklyn or in the Bronx, it has a very, very, very high chance to be translated into German. So German English is far on top, or American English is far on top of books being translated into German, and then comes, you know, of course, you know, the neighboring countries. After all, they're closer, still closer. But the strange thing is that the Arab world has not been accepted as the neighboring culture yet. And I'm trying to do this in the press all the time, you know. I'm trying, you know, to encourage publishing houses and to remind readers that the Arab world are actually our neighbors. They may be across the Mediterranean or a little further, like here, but for us immediately, they are across the Mediterranean. They are our neighboring culture. So it would be most necessary and most interesting to get involved or get interested in their culture. And my image always is that literature or literary works are actually like the little stones of a mosaic. And if you have just one stone, it's useless. You have no idea of what's meant for. If you have several hundred stones, you may already arrive at a certain picture of the things described in literature. Because, you know, one single work does not explain much, but it explains something. So if you have many works, many things will be explained and could be understood about the world, the Arab world, Arab thought, thinking, suffering, etc.
نعم. يعني هناك الكثير علينا نحن العرب، هناك عمل كثير ينتظرنا بخصوص نقل أدبنا العربي إلى لغات أجنبية. يعني أعتقد أنا أنه عن طريق الأدب هو الواسطة الأمثل لتوصيل حضارة ما إلى شعوب أخرى.
Definitely, it's definitely so. Yeah, I mean, I think literature is the best. It is the best means to learn something about another culture. In my classes about the Middle Eastern history, etc., Middle Eastern politics, I usually recommended the students to read certain novels, not so much to read studies by sociologists or politologues, but to read novels to see how Arabs themselves would explain not only their environment but their proper feelings, their thoughts, their happiness, their griefs, and everything is there. And I think therefore translation is necessary. But today we know each and every detail about American daily life from umpteen authors translated into German and also from other countries, but very, very, very little from the Arab world.
يعني على دور النشر العربية أن تعنى بهذا الشيء، وهو ليس فقط نقل الأدب الأجنبي إلى اللغة العربية، وإنما الأدب العربي إلى اللغات الأجنبية، إلى مختلف اللغات الأجنبية.
Yeah, well, this is a very touchy ground, actually, because I mean, so far, this support, the financial support that I received for translating Arabic literature, did come from European institutions. Yeah, we have to face it.
Yeah.
The Arabic institutions have so far largely been silent as far as the transfer of their own literature into foreign languages is concerned. These institutions, I mean, I've dreamt when the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris opened its gates in the late 80s of the last century. I was dreaming of an institution that would really help people like myself to support their work all over Europe, not only on the Île-de-France, but all over Europe. But it has not happened. And to give you just one more example that I like particularly much, I've been translating for 35 years Arabic literature, and never has any cultural attaché from the Arab world in Switzerland or France or Germany contacted me. I mean, this is incredible for any literature. You would not believe it. I mean, if you translate from Spanish, yes, you have contact with the Spanish consulate or embassy. If you translate from Hebrew, they will help you. If you translate from Arabic, you're almost left by yourself.
أنا أعرف هذا، وهناك يعني يجب أن تتحرك هذه المؤسسات لأن هذا جزء كبير من تقريبنا إلى العالم. يعني عن طريق الأدب يمكن تقريب الصورة عن العرب في الغرب، يعني لأن الآن الصورة سيئة تماماً بسبب ما يحدث، والطريقة الأمثل لمحاربة مثل هذه الصورة السلبية هي نقل الأدب، نقل الرواية، نقل الشعر. يعني
yeah, that's true. But you see, there's also another point. I mean, I try to be really an in-between. I remember an evening of reading and critique in Cairo when an Egyptian writer stood up and said, "You translators, you only translate books that contain scandals about the Arab world." So I asked him, well, listen, these are the works that are written. So if you have the situation of women, you know, a favorite topic, or the situation of political repression, or the situation of poverty, or what have you for situations, but these are topics of contemporary Arabic literature. I can't help it. And if I find these well presented in a book, that then I will take the book and translate it.
Don't pay attention to these people because for about some books there are always يعني خلاف على هذا الموضوع. لا يتقبل الجميع كتابات على الأسواني أو غيرهم، ولكن أعتقد أنت خياراتك جيدة. وننتقل الآن، شكرا جزيلا، وننتقل إلى الجمهور إذا كان هناك سؤال إلى السيد. أوكي غادة.
Thank you. My name is Ghada. First, thank you very much for the very interesting session. I find the story of Christopher and the resemblance between the journey of translation and the particular part of transporting the Messiah is really fascinating. I have two questions. The first one is, in the particular case of Arabic, which for us it's a heavy language which is loaded with lots of pictures and many meanings for the word, the field of meanings for the word, how you manage to translate and navigate through different texts in absence of a cultural guidance. How a dictionary in this case for me is not enough, because it's complicated. It's not about the meaning of the word, but the history of the word and what's linked to it, whether it's a proverb or a certain culture. The second part, when you mentioned that you translate when it appeals to you, does that mean that the translator decide what part of a culture they will transmit and what part they will block? Because then it's a personal decision. Then to what extent a role of a translator in influencing the exchange between different cultures and civilizations? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, the first thing is, of course, with the language, you know, the particular language, Arabic as a particular language, that is true. Each language has, or in each language, words have a history. And it, of course, depends to what extent you think that the history of the word is included when using the word. And this is, here we are in a problem. I mean, we do not always, with each and every word, think of the whole history. We can't. But we have a synchronic division. So we have to, you know, at a certain level, the Arabic language is used today. And then it's, of course, it's true, you have images and things, and there it is, again, we come back again to the question of decision of whether a translation is possible or not. I say it's possible if you accept the fact that you lose things and that you gain things. Yeah, you lose certain, as you mentioned, you lose certain meanings of the original word. This is necessary. But at the same time, of course, you gain certain meanings, allusions to a word that you did not have in the original language. So this is the mechanics of translations, and we cannot help it. And that's why some people say translation is not possible, because it will falsify the sublime word of the original text. Okay, if they think so, they may rest untranslated. Yeah, okay, that's the thing. The second is, of course, with the translator as a judge, as you would indicate, yeah, it's true, but the point is, in publishing houses, you will have employees who read, maybe in Europe, who read maybe English, German, French, maybe Italian, sometimes Spanish. That's it. They will not read Norwegian or Finnish, which means they have to rely on what in our professional terminology is called scouts, people running around looking for things that they can find. And then, of course, you have to have a certain, of course, I mean, that would be a prerequisite to have a certain ability of literary judgment. And then, of course, if you like something, you would have still to, as a translator and as a scout, you would have still to convince a publishing house that this is, for such and such and such reason, a good book. Not only because it describes a scandal or what have you, or the Oriental Romanticism, the 1001 Nights or something like that, but because it is an interesting presentation of an interesting subject.
لماذا يتم التركيز على الثقافة العربية من خلال الروايات؟ توجد حركة شعرية هائلة في العالم العربي لكن لا يبدو أن لها صدى. لماذا لا نجد ترجمات للشعر العربي خاصة المعاصر؟
My relationship to poetry in general, not only to Arabic poetry, but to poetry in general, is a rather broken one. I cannot relate to poetry. I need what they call a red thread that runs through a work, and I cannot really deal with the allusions that are found in poetry. I may find this interesting, but I would never dare translate them. I made some attempts, but I never did. And also, the second thing is that I'm with some Arab authors and also critics. For instance, the famous Gaber Asfour in Egypt, who says that we live in the Asr al-Riwaya. And I'm deeply convinced that also in the Arab world, you live in the Asr al-Riwaya, which means, and I mean, the argument is that in poetry, you do something else. You do not really, say, analyze the state of humans or of societies, of structures or whatever, as you may do in a novel. But in poetry, you talk much more, say, individually. And therefore, I'm quite with these people who actually, they were the Salama Musa already, between the two world wars, talked, I think he was probably the first one to insist that this time and age, this was in the 1930s, that this time and age is a Asr Riwaya. So it's my personal decision. I know some other people like to translate poetry also in Germany. I don't.
نأخذ سؤال آخر تفضل.
Thank you so much for a very interesting talk of translation. I am Dr. Tariq, and also I wrote about translation. I have two questions. The first question is, do you think the ideology of the translator affect translating a text from a language to another? And the second question is, taking into consideration that you've been translating for more than 40 years, I think you have now a wide experience of translating. Why don't you translate the Quran into German? Because I know of some translation of the meaning of the Quran into German which are not authenticized or matches the mainstream Islam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Well, the ideology, of course, it's a question what you mean with the ideology of a translator. Whether you mean, no, I really, okay, I'm not quite sure what that means, the ideology of a translator. I don't know what ideology I have when translating. I really couldn't tell you. I mean, I have certain political convictions. If this is an ideology, I do have, but I don't think that these political convictions enter my translating. They may enter the selection of a book. That's quite true. As I said to the colleague here, of course, I select books that appeal to me personally, and then I discuss with the publishing house. So I'm. It's the dogmas, the beliefs. Well, if in a book Muslim beliefs are described, I translate the Muslim beliefs. There's no problem about it. I mean, these are novels. I would, if anybody, and if they describe how terrorism works, I will describe how terrorism works. I mean, and as far as say religious things are concerned, I have a good terminology in the European tradition. I mean, there's really no problem in translating particularly religious ideology or religious convictions. We have our terminology, we had our history of religion, religious beliefs, and as they were talking about Ibn Arabi and mysticism, I mean, we have our terminology of mysticism that could be used to translate maybe Muhammad Alwan's work into German, because the terminology is there and I would use it. I mean, there's no problem about this. The second is why I don't translate the Quran. I can tell you, at present, there is a certain rush on the European market to publish new translations of the Quran, and I certainly don't want to join them. For one thing, I'm a completely unreligious person. I don't have a good say a close tie to religious feelings, but also I decided to translate contemporary Arabic writing, and the Quran does not figure.
شكرا لجوابك. نأخذ سؤال أخير.
شكرا جزيلا. سؤالي يصب: هل تكفي معرفة لغتين للمترجم لكي تتم الترجمة بينهما؟ أنا مترجمة وأعرف أنه عندما نعرف المعنى الظاهر للكلمات لا يمكن أن نترجم بشكل صحيح. باللغة الفرنسية مثلا يقول الفرنسيون عن استقبله بحفاوة، يقولون أستقبله بصدر حار أو بقلب حار chaleureusement. أما العرب يقولون استقبلته بصدر يعني مثلج. فإذا ترجمنا المعنيين نقول تصبح الترجمة مشوهة تماما. فباعتقادي المترجم يجب أن يكون متشبع بالحضارة وباللغة وبالبيئة وبمجموعة من الأشياء التي تؤهله لترجمة النص بشكل جيد. ما هو رأيكم؟
Well, this of course is a question that the translator asks him or herself at every sentence, because the question it cannot be decided on principle, which means forever, but with each and every expression like this, image like this, you have to decide whether there is an appropriate image in my own language that I could easily use without falsifying the original, or whether the original expression invites a translation. to widen the linguistic horizon of readers. I mean, all good and important translators have widened linguistically the horizon of the readers by using certain expressions, certain words that they took from the original because they did not transgress the borders of what is possible in their language. I'm just now struggling. It's sort of almost the final battle now with a novel by Raja Alem. I don't know if you know her, from Saudi Arabia. I translated her first one, this here, the Tawq al-Hamama, a few years ago, and now another one. And you know, she really very often gives me that problem. She really gives me the problem because she uses expressions that I have to think always, or to consider whether I can take these expressions over into German, or whether a German readership would immediately say, no, listen, also, that's too much. Yeah. So I think this is an ad hoc decision you have to make each and every time that you come across something that you cannot. Alal Aswani doesn't really pose this problem to me because his language is plain and easygoing. There are others like, you know, Gamal Ritani or Edward El Kharat or Emil Habibi or many that I translated. So.
شكرا. السؤال الأخير تفضلي.
Hello. Sabah Aisawi. I am a university professor in the studies of children's literature, and I'm especially interested in translation. Thank you very much for being here with us today, and I'm sure you have sensed the appreciation and the interest that we have for you, you know, as a translator of Arabic culture into German. Thank you very much for that. I had a number of questions, but it seems like, you know, the audience like have already tackled those questions. The question that has not been asked is, by looking at your short bio on the screen, I can see the variety of the origin of the writers, that is to say, from different countries of the Arab world. So I would be interested, it would be interesting to ask, did you, as, you know, as somebody coming from outside the Arab world, did you notice any subcultural differences between the different authors, let's say, coming from Egypt, from Palestine, from Saudi Arabia, and so on?
Well, you see, I know that there is a debate ongoing in the Arab world about whether Arabic literature exists. And I think there exist literary works written in Arabic. And I don't think there is anything that is common to all of them. I don't even think that national literatures exist. I'm personally convinced they do not. I don't think that German literature exists. I know that there are quite a few German authors existing and writing in different ways, and this is the same for Swiss or English literature. So I think the same goes with Arabic literature. There are so many people from different origins, from the, as you mentioned, as you saw here, from different countries, with different backgrounds, with different ways of writings. I mean, who would compare, say, or would want to compare the writing of Emily Nasrallah, who writes in a very, say, emotional, traditional Lebanese style, to compare her work with the work of Sun'Allah Ibrahim from Egypt, who is a really harsh critic and a very sharp, harsh critic of Egyptian society. The language is completely different, and there are probably more contacts between Sun'Allah Ibrahim's writing and some American or European writers, like Hemingway or others, than with Emily Nasrallah's writing, whereas Emily Nasrallah's writing is tightly connected to the writing of Mikhail Nuaima, for instance. So you know you have these things that is interior. I think there may have been a particular Lebanese style of writing, but this has disappeared. I mean, Ilyas Khouri, Rashid Al-Daif, Hassan Daoud, or Hanana Shaikh, they write completely differently. So they are. Well, of course, the culture, again, the culture is the question, what are they writing about and how are they presenting things? And of course, they're writing on different things. I mean, of course, writing about the civil war in Beirut, you know, my examples come from the Mashriq rather than from the Emirates, because I'm more versed in this. Writing about the civil war in Beirut is, of course, something different from writing about a village in the Lebanese south. So these are completely different things, and the culture in Beirut is a different one from the culture in the Lebanese village. And again, if an immigrant or someone writes a historical novel, then you know he touches on different things. Of course, he or she take the topics from their own environment, usually, you know, from the places they know, the developments they know, and everything they know. But this differs from one person to another, and there may be certain things that connect Lebanese writers or Egyptian writers or Moroccan writers to each other.
يعني عفوا، أنت تتكلم عن عوالم مختلفة داخل رواية. هناك عالم مختلف لكل روائي، هناك أمور. نعم، هي اللغة نفسها، ولكن العوالم تختلف والصور تختلف. شكرا جزيلا لاستماعكم. شكرا دكتور هارتموت. يعني سننتهي بهذا الحد، سنكتفي بهذا القدر. هناك أسئلة أخرى، فرجاء اللي عنده سؤال ممكن أن يتواصل مع دكتور هارتموت بعد الجلسة. ممكن أن تجلس هنا وتتحدثوا. شكرا جزيلا لك وشكرا لكم.